On behalf of Usanus Foundation, I welcome all the honorable speakers and our participants. We have our partner organizations, Law and Alliance Society and GPI, and Bipindra ji is our host and a dear friend and a family and a part of the family of Usanus Foundation. So let me introduce our panelists first. Dr. Omendra Ratno from Jaipur. He is an ENT surgeon, but he has been doing a terrific work in the field of refugees and migrants who came from Pakistan, and he has some real ground level insights. We have Joyita Basuji from Sunday Guardian. He is a veteran journalist with years and decades of experience in journalism. We have Amanjeet Singh with us from, he is a Kashmiri Sikh from Baramulla. His family and everyone, like his community, has faced a lot of persecution and atrocities at the hands of Islamists and jihadis in Kashmir. So he will give us some really fresh and ground level insights about what his community is facing. We have Savio Rodriguez from Goa, again a veteran journalist, and he writes amazing articles. I've been reading, following lately his articles on WHO, and recently he has written amazing pieces on India-China standoff, and he has taken stand. Like he has made his points of view clear on various issues that matter to the national security. Today we have amazing participants from across the world, and I welcome all of you. We are really honored to have all of you here. Before I begin, I'll just give a brief overview of what we are exactly looking at today. So the topic, as we all know, it's minorities in Pakistan, a life under siege. To begin with, I would like to say that there is something inherent right in the genesis of Pakistan, which is which makes it an extremist, a totalitarian state, okay? And which goes against any kind of diversity or differences, be it cultural, be it religious, be it ethnic. So we are addressing all kinds of minorities in Pakistan: ethnic minorities, linguistic minorities, religious minorities, and cultural minorities. So we are addressing all kinds of minorities in Pakistan. And over the last 60 to 70 years, they have faced immense persecution about which we hardly know anything. If you just Google Kashmir, Indian administered Kashmir, you get tons and tons of information. But no, what about the Pakistan occupied Kashmir? What about Balochistan? What about the Chitral Valley? What about Shias? What about Hazaras in Pakistan? What about Christians in Pakistan? We hardly get any information. There is something which actually runs in the DNA of Pakistan, in their different constitutional provisions, which is inherently discriminating against minorities, or rather persecuting. So I'll be inviting different speakers to share their thoughts and opinions, and I know it's an open house. Please feel free to speak in whichever language you prefer and you feel comfortable. Okay, so I'll begin with Joyita ji. She is the eldest among all of us.
Okay, Abhinav, thank you for inviting me to address this.
It's our pleasure.
Okay, you see, when we are talking about, as I told you that day, when we are talking about the Pakistan minorities in Pakistan, I also want to bring in the very important issue of Citizenship Amendment Act, because it's after all intended to give or expedite the process of giving citizenship to all these people coming in from Pakistan. And when we are talking about Pakistan, let us also not forget about Bangladesh, primarily because when we are talking about Bangladesh was East Pakistan. And from East Pakistan, and the problem that we have seen in India also in terms of migration and all, the problem has come from the time of, that the separation from the time of partition and Pakistan and East Pakistan. So when we are talking about it, minority problems in Pakistan, we cannot see it in isolation, because many of these people are also coming to us, and it is here that the politics part of it begins. It is here that India's interest is also involved. So that is the reason why when we are talking about Pakistan, we have to talk about these parts also. Now here I want to just I hope not to take up too much of anybody's time, but the thing is I want to just divide about whatever I'm going to speak about in four parts. Let me first talk about the what exactly is the situation of the minorities in Pakistan in brief. I'm hoping every part will be in brief. And then I want to touch upon the CAA issue. And when we are talking about the CAA, as I said, it's also about East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh. We have to talk about NRC because NRC is primarily about finding out about the Bangladeshis and illegal immigrants. That is our primary focus. Although it has been confused between refugees coming in from Pakistan, and a whole lot of complexities are there, obviously. And then I want to talk about India's response to the whole thing. How the minorities who are coming in from the Pakistan, and also how Indian government also has been dealing with this whole problem. So, if time permits, now let me just start. When we are talking about, you see, Pakistan, there is no, in 2017, census was conducted, but those results, we don't have those reports. So we have to base our whatever perception that we have in terms of the minority population of Pakistan, we have to go back to the 1998 census. So I think at that time, what we are talking about is around 96 point something a Sunni Muslim population. I mean, non-Muslim and non-Muslims. I mean, including minorities, including Shias and Ahmadiyas and Ismailis, Bohras, everybody, and Hindus, Christians, everybody included. It's about less than 4% or 4%. So majority of these Hindus, particularly, they live in the Sindh province. Now, what we have seen is, you see, this number has come down from 23% from the time of partition. The religious minorities, they were around 23%. That has come down to around 4, 5%, 3%, whatever it is. But according to whatever I have studied, it is less than 10%. That is for certain. Now, what we are witnessing in what these people are witnessing is Pakistan. They are not just facing institutional discrimination, but they are also facing some kind of an indifference and insensitivity from an overwhelmingly Sunni population. So what they are facing is, they are not only facing a threat to their religious identity, but also to their lives, their economic, social, cultural, political existence. Basically, they are facing discrimination in all spheres, and including institutional discrimination, institutional and societal, both sides of discrimination. Now, the problems that our minorities are facing, particularly Hindus, Sikhs, and Christians and all, abduction of girls, their forced conversion and marriage to Muslims, boys and men. Now, according to the Hindu Council in 2014, over 1,000 girls were forcibly converted in Sindh. Now, when these cases, when the girls' families, they go and register the cases, the girls remain in the custody of the abductors throughout. Okay, the girls' families are not allowed to meet them. Now, this happens with both Sikhs and Christians. Then kidnapping of traders and businessmen, they happen in Balochistan for ransom. This is very rampant. Discrimination is happening even in schools, at the school levels, particularly outside the big cities. What happens? Parents are forced to hide their children's name by giving Muslim names. Their places of worship are desecrated. Now, the blasphemy laws in Pakistan, they are an abomination. It allows vigilante justice, and the maximum sentence is death. What has happened, you see, this law, this is actually the British, these laws, there are several small laws in that, sections that are there, out of which the punishment are many. In section 295B, it says defiling the pages of the Quran attracts a life term, while section 295C gives the death penalty for derogatory remarks about the Holy Prophet. Okay, now this is misused and abused by radical groups. People have been lynched and burnt by using this thing. They are justified. They justify, they can just blame anybody, saying that you have torn off a page of the Quran, you have said something derogatory of Prophet Muhammad. We have seen what has happened in the Asia Bibi case. And in 2014, a couple were burnt to death by a mob, basically, just because they said that vigilante. So basically, this allows a vigilante justice. So after that, it was only, in fact, think of it, it's the discrimination is so deep that it was in only 2017 that the Hindu marriages were recognized by law. Okay, it was for the first time in 2017, I'm talking 3 years back, and Pakistan was formed in 1947, that Hindu marriages were declared legal for the first time in 70 years. So, yes, as the previous speaker was saying, you see, when they talk about India and India's context, nobody is talking about the kind of discrimination, the kind of threat to life that Pakistanis minorities facing, as living there, are facing. In fact, there is a report that says, I mean, the Pakistan Hindu Council, they claim 5,000 minimum Pakistani minority, especially among the Hindus, they migrate to India every year. So, so what we have, it's a huge number of population who have come over from the other side of the border. And now, when we are talking about it, so obviously, this being the background, I want to talk a bit about the Citizenship Amendment Act. So let me read out, because there's so much misinterpretation has happened. This whole thing has been done so badly that, I mean, throughout the world, a terrible impression has gone out that India is an Islamophobe state. India, it's about disenfranchising Muslims and all. I'm certain people here know, but even then, let me just read out a little bit of the text. Now, the text says that, of the Citizenship Amendment Act, that provided that any person belonging to Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi or Christian community from Afghanistan, Bangladesh or Pakistan who entered into India on or before the 31st day of December 2014 and who has been exempted by the central government by certain things they have mentioned about Passport Act and all, they shall not be treated as illegal migrant for the purposes of this act. Now, you see, the idea is that now this Citizenship Amendment Act also has a clause which says in the third schedule to the Principal Act in clause D, the following proviso shall be inserted, which says that provided that for other person belonging to these 6 communities from these countries, the aggregate period of residence or service of government in India as required under this clause shall be read not less than 5 years in place of not less than 11 years. Okay, let me just explain what I'm talking about. The idea is that many persons belonging to the Hindu, Sikh, Buddhist, Jain, Parsi and Christian communities who have been facing persecution in Pakistan and these 2 other countries, what has happened is that because of their religious identities and have fled to India seeking shelter and continue to stay in India, even if their travel documents have expired or they have incomplete or no documents, they can avail of this act. And 2014 up to the cutoff date is December 31st 2014. Now, before the amendment, these persons were treated as illegal migrants and they were ineligible to apply for Indian citizenship. Okay, there are 2 ways, I mean, that they could have applied, but they were ineligible: registration and naturalization. So that was not there. So basically, CAA is about bringing a special regime to give the citizenship to these people. Okay, now for those who have entered legally, and if you are going to apply for the process of, there are 2 basically. So there is this illegal migrants who have come in. So if you have come in before 2014, 31st December, you automatically become citizens. If you do not have papers, and if you want to apply through the process of naturalization, you have to wait 5 years, not 11 years anymore. So that is, these are the 2 basic components. So from 11 to 12 years, we have made it into 5 years. Now, this act, what was not made clear to the people by the government, in fact, that is something I find very strange about this government, that their communication skills are so bad that what they did not make it clear to the people who were protesting out on the streets, that they did not make it clear to the international audience out there, that this act is about making things easy, a bit easy for some people who were not able to apply for citizenship because they did not have any papers. But at the same time, they also had to fulfill certain conditions. Okay, it is not a free pass to anybody. It is not a free pass to anybody. So it's about it's all about making things a bit easy for certain communities. Now, here something that has been fundamental to India's policy. India has been differentiating between refugees and economic migrants. You see, this is the main problem. Muslims who are coming in for economic reasons, they could be from Pakistan, but primarily from Bangladesh, they are being treated as economic migrants. But persecuted people who are coming in, say from Pakistan or from Bangladesh or from Afghanistan, belonging to the minority, they are being treated as refugees. Now, this is the fundamental difference, and this is the fundamental problem that is behind all this kerfuffle over what all happened over this thing. Now, it is not about denying citizenship to Muslims who are coming in, because any Muslim who is coming in is eligible to apply for citizenship. But yes, they will have to go through that naturalization process, and they will have to fulfill those conditions, and 11 years. While for these people, they have made it like 5 or 6 years, 5 years. Now, when we are talking about that, you see, so basically it is assumed that the whole fundamental principle of this thing is that the CAA is that as Muslims, you don't face persecution in Pakistan. As a Muslim, you don't face persecution in what was earlier East Pakistan. So that is the reason why you do not come under the ambit of Citizenship Amendment Act. Because you see what happens, people on the ground also, when you go and visit these people who have come over from across the border, their first point is that when you ask them, I have gone to maybe the border villages, and my experience has been primarily along the border villages of West Bengal. I've gone to Gundgaon and all that. These people have all come from Bangladesh, not Bangladesh. At that time, it was East Pakistan. So all these people, they say that, you see, why the Muslims, you have your own country. That is why the partition happened. So why do you want them to be included in the law when we are the people who have come here? We do not have papers. We are basically illegal here, but we are settled here. We don't have anywhere to go. Why shouldn't we get some sort of a little bit of extra, advantage, if I can use that word over here? Now, so this is the main problem. They say that we are fled a country, we are stateless. If India does not help us, who will help us? Now here, if I have been able to explain, I hope I've been able to explain what I've been able to say, what I've been trying to say. Now this whole thing is, you see, this whole kerfuffle, the trouble that happened, because CAA was seen in conjunction with NRC. Okay, but can we see it in conjunction with NRC? No, we cannot, because CAA is about giving citizenship, while NRC is about illegal migrants, and NRC is about identifying the illegal economic migrants. NRC is not about identifying illegal refugees who have come. That is why the main problem has happened. There is a distinction. You see, and when I'm talking about, and here I need to give a little bit of context. I hope I'm not boring anybody.
No, that's fine. Please continue.
Okay, now when I'm talking about NRC, I need to give a little bit of context. Now, NRC process started in Assam. Now, it was the Supreme Court mandated exercise to ensure that the indigenous population of Assam could preserve their land, language, and culture, because they were facing a continuous influx of illegal migrants from across the border in Bangladesh. Now, the situation is such in Assam that and this migration, by the way, Assam has a long history. This is started basically in 1930s, and the Bengali Hindu migration started even earlier, late 19th century, early 20th century. The British took the Bengalis from the Bengal, and they settled them in around Guwahati and whatever, that area. So it has a long history of migration. What Assam has witnessed is influx of both Muslim migrants and both Bengali Muslims and Bengali Hindus. Migration has happened. Of course, there's a lot of history over there also. I don't want to get into that. But the present day situation in Assam is such that they are worried in another couple of decades they will become a minority in their own land. See, total demographic change is taking place. So, uh, this is the reason why the Supreme Court ordered the NRC. As I said, the NRC was about identifying the illegal immigrant. Now, the problem that has happened with this CAA coming in and Assam is that Assam wants everybody out, all illegal immigrants out. For Assam, it's a question of ethnic identity. Assamese Muslims and Assamese Hindus, Assamese Muslims and Assamese Hindus, they consider themselves as all indigenous Assamese. So the division is actually about language and it's about ethnic identity. You see, they want everybody out, but bringing in CAA, what has happened is you see this huge number of Bengali Hindus who are there in Assam. They have all become citizens, legal citizens. So automatically, what Assam is complaining about is that a little bit of that demographic change has already, you've legitimized that. That is why the protest happened. Because you see, CAA is about religious identity. NRC, the way it was done in Assam is about ethnic identity. So that is the primary difference. Now, but the exercise was done so badly that the problem that happened in Assam is that in the final NRC, when 19 lakh people were left out, around 8 to 9 lakh were Hindu Bengalis. Okay, and while 5 to 6 lakhs were illegal immigrant Muslims. Apart from that, indigenous Muslim names also came in, Gorkha names also came in, and all that. So, what happened is that the way it was done, it was anything but foolproof, and it was to save this Hindu Bengali population to fall out of the net. The CAA became very handy. So you bring the CAA, and these people become your population. This had a reflection in the Assam election. This will have a reflection in the Bengal election because these two states are the maximum, that illegal immigration that has taken place. These two states are the maximum affected, and CAA will have a huge impact on Bengal elections next year. I mean, there are several seats where there is this Motua community, the scheduled caste, the Dalits who have come over from Bangladesh, from East Pakistan and all. They are in a position to decide seat after seat. They will do it and it will have a huge, huge impact. In fact, I see it as also, the CAA has been brought in not just because of the refugees who are coming in from Pakistan, but also with an eye on the Bengal elections. Now, so the thing is that you see, so as I explained to you, now this has been in fact fundamental problem with Assam. As I said, it is about whether you are going for you're an economic migrant or about a religious thing. Now, since the BJP is in power, so is this political? Obviously, it is political. As I said,
Excuse me. Can we stick to Pakistan, please?
yeah, no,
Yeah.
but you don't. No, but these people are also, as I'm saying, when you're talking about CAA, I explain, until and unless I bring in these things, it is also no, because you cannot just discount certain people just because you are not, they are not part of it. Okay, because when you look at Bangladesh, they are also East Pakistanis. They also have come, and they are all discriminated people. You just cannot identify one person, one particular group, and say no, nobody else is this thing. So when we are talking, and I have already said that I'm going to talk about the CAA and NRC because it affects everybody. So the thing is, you see, and it affects this population that is coming from Pakistan as well. So the thing is, you see, when we are talking about that, the CAA, the bottom line is, you see, the problem that happened here in terms of the messaging part of the government was that is NRC needed all across the country? No, it is not. Because it is, as I said, it is about identifying the Bengali Muslims. It is not so much about identifying the illegal Pakistanis who are coming in. Okay. So when we are talking about what we have seen is that to make it but now I'm coming into the thing, Now, this was made into an issue of disenfranchisement of the entire Muslim community in India who speak different languages, eat different food, dress differently in different parts of the country. How is even that possible? How bringing in CAA or NRC will disenfranchise the Muslim community is not known. Okay. And now, in terms of the government's role, now it defies intelligence how a government which handled the fallout or the lack of it of abrogating Article 370 with such efficiency allowed the narrative to be hijacked in such a manner that a whole Muslim community was up in arms, fearing that they would lose their citizenship. Now, communication could have been clearer, mixed messages should have become. It appears that the government did not anticipate that the CAA law, which was meant for the refugees who were coming, which was supposed to be these thing, they could be misinterpreted like that. And the kind of propaganda that took place over there, it is unimaginable. And India has got branded as an Islamophobe. So the whole point is, you see, if we unless and until you see this in context of the whole picture, you cannot nothing can be seen in isolation. When you are going to talk about the Pakistanis, the suffering over there, we can go on and on and on talking about the same thing. But the fact of the matter is that what are we doing about it? We do something about it and you say, sorry, that is not acceptable. That the whole country is saying that is not acceptable. We are doing something about the Pakistani refugees. We are doing something about the people who have come in from them. But when that is done, everybody says, no, that is not the way to do it. It is about disenfranchising Muslims. Is that the case? Is that the message? And here I am being told that, yeah, let's stick to Pakistan. How is this matter isolated from what is going on over here? So this is the lack of empathy. This is the lack of empathy that is the problem. And this is the lack of empathy that is there in our own country. Refusal to see anything positive being done as something that can be, refusal to see something positive that is being done. You don't see it in context. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry I took up so much time. I hope that's enough.
Joyita ji, thank you very much. In fact, I also agree with you that the issues are connected. And thanks for giving so much of insightful information about the CAA NRC. Because certainly, you're right in the sense that the issue has blown out of proportion, and in fact, our own people, our intellectuals, our journalists, have written very misleading op-eds in articles about this without getting into the details. And the government could not handle the propaganda part. After 370, they did a wonderful job, but especially after CAA, NRC, the entire world, we are being seen as countries which are persecuting minorities. And on the other hand, Pakistan, who are the real culprits, the original sinners, they are blaming us of mob lynching. They are blaming us of persecuting our minorities, and no one from our side even talks about that. Not even we don't expose that. I think because we are not able to put things in context or connect with the things. So that way, I really agree with you that this has to be seen in the context. Thank you very much for the insightful information. I'll come back to you. Before that, Dr. Ratnu, we would like to hear your experiences and thoughts since you've been working on the field for so many years now.
I don't know where to start, in the sense that I can continue with what the previous two speakers have said, and we can counter whatever they have said, and agree with some part of what they said. Or I can give you just my perspective of how things have been shaping up in Rajasthan, where we are living with 2 lakh Pakistani Hindu and Sikh refugees. So whatever. Firstly, there are certain things here which are being said again and again, that the population of the minorities in Pakistan is 10% or 5%. It's 1.8%, including all the Sikhs and Hindus and everybody. I think equal number of Christians live there, but they constitute about 1.5%. So we are looking at max 3.5% of population as being non-Muslim in Pakistan. The blasphemy law is being overrated because it's not the blasphemy law, it's a genocide we are looking at. It has been going on ever since the partition happened. The biggest migration happened in 1971 when 1 lakh Hindus crossed the border from Chachro and walked into Rajasthan simply with an Indian army. The other migration happened at Babri Masjid demolition. And ever since, whenever something flares up between India and Pakistan, these things go on. The European Union Parliament has given a report that 1,000 Hindu, Sikh, and Christian girls are being picked every year. That means, on an average, 3 girls are being picked every single day. that is the level of atrocities going on. It's definitely the failure of Hindu and Sikh leadership combined to take this saga to the international community. We should have gone to the International Court of Justice to put the state of Pakistan at test. We should have gone to the Human Rights Commission, United Nations. We should have taken a plane load of Pakistani Hindus and Sardars who have been direct victims of this jihad, and we should have had the narrative in our hands. That didn't happen because our Hindu leadership and the Sikh leadership are busy fighting each other for breadcrumbs, or lackadaisical without any purva paksha, or we could say without that fire to take this issue internationally. Maybe they lack the wherewithal, they lack the resources, as we have seen. Now, that's a statement of the problem. What are we doing about it? As our sanstha in Jaipur, Nimitt Ekam, we are primarily into documenting each and every atrocity that is happening on Hindus and Sardars and Christians in Pakistan. I must confess, I'm not too much in touch with the Pakistani Christian community as much as I'm in touch with Pakistani Hindu and Sikh community in Sindh and in Punjab, Pakistani Punjab. We act as an interface between the Indian government and these refugees. And for the past 6 years, we have taken out 10,000 Hindus and Sardars together out of Pakistan by our resources. And we have managed to get 2,000 citizenships on our own before the CAA was implemented. That is the level of work we have done, but with a very compassionate intervention by the previous Modi ji government, where Rajnath Singh ji issued a notification that the district collectors of Jaipur, Jodhpur, and Jaisalmer can grant citizenships. That was a game changer. It helped us a lot to get citizenship for these people if their papers were complete, because we didn't have to do this to and fro from the Delhi Ministry of Home Affairs. Now, I can a few words about the narrative, the Hindu narrative from the Pakistani Hindu and Sikh story. Firstly, CAA was not only a piece of very compassionate and extremely intelligent legislation, and I think it was done perfectly well, unless it was taken by a very well-oiled, well-funded jihadi PR machinery. We were outfunded, we are outsmarted, and we were also caught napping. We never thought that this kind of an opposition is going to come. But having said that, there is no rationale for any Muslim in these three countries seeking refuge in India, either on humanitarian or economic reasons. As simple as that. This country was partitioned on the basis, on the premise of religion. That's it. That's where we are. There are Muslims in India. They're most welcome to stay here as citizens. They are our brothers. We do not need anybody else from these three countries except our forgotten, forsaken Hindu, Sardar, Buddhist, Christian, Parsi, and Jain brothers. They were victims of a treachery committed by the leadership at the time of partition, and they themselves enacted the 1955 Citizenship Act, in which Citizenship Amendment Act is nothing new. It is just an amendment in the 1955 Citizenship Act. So if anybody has a grudge, you should go to the Nehru and the Gandhi family and tell them that they are the ones who initially documented that law. As far as the wording is concerned, I'm pretty happy with satisfied with the wording, because I know 31,000 Pakistani Hindus and Sardars getting citizenship means they are empowered, and they will be sponsoring more Hindus and more Sardars to come out of that hellhole for Hindus and Sardars. What is the point of Hindu leadership raising the issue of Pakistani Hindus and Sardars on international communities? With one stroke of what Pakistan as an Islamic jihadi society is doing to Hindus and Sardars, we demolish the whole premise of Khalistan. We have two Sikh brothers here. One of them mentioned about that girl child, Jagjit Kaur, picked up, converted to Aisha. We should be ashamed in the modern era that we sat on it. We are still living with it, that this child has been converted. She's bearing the child of a Muslim against her will. And this is happening to the head Granthi of Nankana Sahib, the purest uh, Tirth for us Hindus and Sardars, all of us. So imagine what an ordinary Hindu or Sardar is enduring in Pakistan. We need. I have the videos of the Pakistani Punjab governor arranging a deal between this girl child and her parents and being returned to her like a kidnapper does for ransom, like a petty gunda doing this. I have that video. I shared it with you. Thank you very much.
Dr. Rattu, thank you very much for the wonderful insight. You have brought us facts like which we would have never known because you work so closely with the people who come from Pakistan, people who are actually facing these atrocities. Okay. I'll come back to you and Joyita ji with some questions, but before that, I'll request Savio to please share his thoughts. Savio, just one question before you begin. You have been very active and vocal on various issues, even CAA, NRC. You've been to Kashmir also. A few days back, I was reading that Steve Bannon, this guy who was aiding Donald Trump and running Breitbart and all. So they are talking, in a very loud voice against India being a country which is, badly treating Christians. And even here, the people in India, like the Christian, I would say, the journalist, activist, and even the whole church lobby also. I mean, don't mind. I'm just, trying to, I would say, the picture which we get. Okay, so they have been, very vocal against CAA and RC. They have been vocal, on these issues. But I mean, I find a complete absence of people talking about Christians in Pakistan. And why we, here we have been living like brothers and sisters. Things are perfectly fine. Okay, why the Christian evangelist groups in US? I mean, they are abusing India. Of late, I got to know at USCRIF, this is a US body on religious freedom, Jamaat-e-Islami proxies. Jamaat-e-Islami is a very radical group in Kashmir. Their proxy charities in US, they were lobbying hard with the Christian evangelist groups, and they were convinced that that the Christians are not safe in India. So, I mean, this is just one question, but you please feel free to share your thoughts on whatever you feel like. Okay? Please.
Well, Abhinav, thank you for bringing me onto this discussion. You bring a very pertinent question with regards to the Christians in India as well as the Christians in Pakistan. Now, there's a very unique trait of the Christians in India in some of them, not all of them. The unique trait is that anything to do with the BJP-led government will be against the Christian community. That's the unique trait. So when bishops and archbishops write out letters to the Christian congregation, when I'm talking the Catholic Church here, as well as the other Protestants and other sects of the Christian community, they're all writing it under that fear factor that they want to spread, that the BJP-led government with the RSS is against the Christians in India. If you look at every communication that they've been talking about, it's always to instill fear that the Christians are in danger, the minorities are in danger. And it's normally during election time. They normally do it a couple of months before election. So the first time I took a stand on it was when the Archbishop of Delhi made a statement very similar before the election, and his name was Anil Kuto, where he said the Christians are in danger, the democratic values of the country are in danger, the constitution is in danger. So that's when I went on national television, and I first wrote an article and then went on national television. And I asked him, I said, can you please define danger in terms of numbers? If you have, first you need to tell us what are the number of cases since Narendra Modi government has been in power that has been with regards to attack of the Christian minorities in India. Vis-a-vis, what is the number of population of Christians in India that do not have a problem or are not living in fear? So you see, in a community, whether it's in India, whether it's in Pakistan, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the UK, communities will always have skirmishes with each other because that is human nature. But to brand an entire situation as Christians being in danger is a lie. And that is what I expose. I expose the lies of the Christian community when they lie about my country, when they lie about the people that actually live together. I do not know a place in India where Christians, Muslims, Parsis, Sikhs don't live together. It is a mindset created by the media. It is a mindset created by certain religious leaders, in particular with the church. But the same people, now here's the strange part. The CAA amendment was for the persecuted minorities, including the Christians in Pakistan, that were already in India before December 31st, 2014. Yet the Catholic Church took a stand that was against the Christians. And that is the hypocrisy of the entire situation. Because on Pakistan and what happens to the minorities over there, the Catholic Church in India doesn't care about it. Because according to their definition of territorial rights, they are only concerned about the minorities in India. And the minorities in India, in particular the Christian minorities, are their responsibility. So they will talk about BJP government bringing the Christians in danger or keeping them in danger or making them live in fear. But they never talk about the sexual abuse that happens in the Christian church, because in the last 5 years, the reported cases are much more than the previous 5 years. Right? But nobody talks about it. So the Catholic Church is an institution that actually just does not work apolitical, it works completely political. Its agenda is against the Narendra Modi government, primarily because they see it as a Hindu-led government. And that is a problem that the Christians will have to learn to deal with, because no religion matters as far as nation is concerned. And nation is above all. So to me, nation has always been above all, and I will continue to expose the church when it comes up against my nation. But the point is, what is the real situation of the minorities in Pakistan? And why it is important as a nation to actually work in helping the minorities in Pakistan. You see, the CAA amendment, contrary to the propaganda that was created across the country and internationally as well, the CAA was a human act. It was an act of humanity. It had nothing to do with politics. You had the Indian government saying, okay, listen, so many people were persecuted. They were living a life like scum and worse than scum in Pakistan. They had come into India over a period of time, and they defined that time span. And here we give them their citizenship that they rightfully deserve. Because they were being harassed, they were being tortured, they were being killed, they were being raped over a period of time. In the Christian community itself, look at Asia Bibi's case. There was a false case put against her. The radicals went completely crazy as far as she was concerned, that finally she had to be whisked away to Canada after the Supreme Court judgment went in her favor. So the point is, in my personal opinion, I don't think any minority is safe in Pakistan. And it's important that our Hindus, our Christians, and our Sikhs that are connected to India are brought back, even from extending the CAA date at a later stage. Because at this point of time, Pakistan is driven by Islamic radicals. They were always driven, they're only getting worse. So when they kidnap minorities, when they rape minorities, when they force minorities to convert to Islam, what is that message? That message is, listen, we don't care about you or your religion. Islam is the future, radicalism is the future for us. And when United States takes side of the Islamic radicals and talks against India, they are merely talking about it because, Abhinav, they want to spread the evangelical aim. They want to spread evangelism in India. So you have to understand, America's biggest contribution is evangelism in India. If you go by the NGOs that were under scrutiny, and I know that for the fact, because the person who did the scrutiny is a very close friend of mine, you will find that most of the funding that were coming into India was coming in from Texas. Most of the funding was coming in from Virginia and Texas. And they were the ones spreading what is known as church planting in India. Church planting is going to Dalits, going to the Hindus, going to the marginalized, and converting them to Christianity. There is no government in India, and I'm saying this again very sternly and very firmly. Even the Narendra Modi government will not be able to do anything against conversions that are happening. They cannot do it. I was to file a petition to Narendra Modi, and I spoke to somebody in the CMO, and he fired me. He said, "Are you out of your mind? Do you want the world to come and attack Narendra Modi for asking a petition against child abuse in the Christian community?" So I don't think conversion will ever stop in India. That major of the conversions is happening in from evangelical groups in the US, evangelical groups in UK, and evangelical groups in Germany. The Catholic Church also contributes to it, but not as much. They do contribute to it. But will the government take a stand against these conversions? The answer is no. So, for us to understand, minority in India will continue to live in fear because the leaders of the church put that fear into them. The leaders of the church will not fight for the minorities in Pakistan because the US knows that it cannot win against an Islamic power in Pakistan. So, as much as they try to evangelize in Pakistan, they will fail. Their evangelizing works out in India more because the population is a lot more, and the population of the Dalits, the marginalized that they reach to, are interested in money, are interested in education, are interested in healthcare. And that is what they sell. They sell a Jesus that gives them all this. That is why they convert. So today, for us, the most important thing to understand is what is the role of the minority in India, and that minority, including the Christian minority, must contribute towards nation building. And that is really what the problem is. So today, we need to come together, not because one is a Hindu, not because one is a Christian, not because one is a Sikh, not because one is a Muslim. We must create an actual messaging that is, we are all Indians irrespective of our religion, because secularism is the most prostituted word. And the prostituted word, according to most Indians, is that secularism is the acceptance of all religion in the matter of governance. And in actuality, it is the acceptance of no religion in matters of governance. And today, the message to the minorities in India, as it is to the minorities in Pakistan, is that the minorities in India must stand up for the nation. The minorities in Pakistan, they must understand that India is a friendly nation for them, and we are here to help them in the best way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Savio. It was really an insightful and a very thorough analysis.
Hat off,
this
Savio ji. Very well spoken.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. So, sir, I know I'll just share something with you. So, I have throughout my life, I have studied in Christian schools, and recently I went to my school sometime back, and the father, principal of the college, he told me that of late we are facing issues even in our school. The local Muslim boys, because of the Wahhabi influx even the small towns like Udaipur, Deobandi Wahhabi influx, they have been making irrational demands that please allow us to keep beards. We want for our festivals, vacations, like 1 month holiday. Why it's only for Diwali? They were really bothered. Same thing if you see in Pakistan, what's happening with the Christians, we all know. The same agenda. I don't see Pakistan as a country. I see more of it as an ideology, as a totalitarian, as an extremist ideology spreading tentacles across the country. And there is a very strong Pakistan in India also. If you go to Kerala, this Wahhabi extremist ideology, they are exactly setting up the same infrastructure, same ecosystem, and the similar treatment will be meted out to minorities there. What is happening to Christians in Pakistan? It's just a matter of time. So that's something which I have to say. And before I invite our next speaker, I'll just briefly introduce about it. So Aman is from Baramulla, and his family has received threats from Jaish-e-Mohammed, and he's a common friend of Savio and me. Okay? and he has seen militancy from close quarters. Like his community has faced a lot, and he has been an actor in Kashmiri Sikh community. They have a lot to share. Aman, please you share your thoughts. आप हिंदी में बोलना चाहो तो you can speak in Hindi also, और खोल करके बात करें.
Thank you for making me part of this discussion, sir. जहाँ तक हम आज डिस्कशन कर रहे हैं माइनॉरिटीज इन पाकिस्तान की, तो मैं यहाँ ये एक शेर है ये आपके साथ साझा करना चाहता हूँ। जख्म पे जख्म खाए हुए होंठ फिर भी हैं मुस्कुराए हुए, मौत की वादी में बैठे हैं यारो जिंदगी की शम्मा जलाए हुए। सो चाहे बात अगर उस पार पाकिस्तान की हो या फिर यहाँ पे उनके एट्रोसिटीज जो यहाँ पे माइनॉरिटीज के साथ हुई है, तो कोई ये बात जो है अनकही नहीं रह गई हुई है सर। जब कहीं भी देखा गया, चाहे बात पाकिस्तान की हो रही हो, तो उसमें अभी जैसे देखा गया था कि गुरुद्वारा साहब के ऊपर अटैक किया गया पाकिस्तान के अंदर। इमरान चिश्ती एक सिख लड़की की अब्डक्शन हुई तो उसको उठा करके किडनैप किया गया, तो उसके बाद गुरुद्वारा के ऊपर स्टोन पेल्टिंग वगैरह होती रही। सर सेम पाकिस्तान का जो हाथ है वो कहीं ना कहीं कश्मीर के अंदर भी बहुत सारी किलिंग्स, बहुत सारी एट्रोसिटीज हैं जिनके अंदर पाकिस्तान का हाथ है। और मैंने काफी सारा ये डाटा भी इकट्ठा कर रखा है जो मैं यहाँ चाहूंगा कि सबके साथ साझा हो आज। तो अभी सर प्रेजेंट सिचुएशन जो सिख कम्युनिटी की है कश्मीर के अंदर, वो आप सारों के साथ साझी करना चाहता हूँ। Basically present position of Sikh community in Jammu and Kashmir. Sikh community nowadays in Jammu and Kashmir is living in both provinces, Jammu as well as Kashmir. Especially Sikhs in Kashmir were living reverential and contented life in a society which was pluralistic in character with a sense of oneness before militancy. Even after facing the tragedy of invasion in October 1947 by covert tribesmen and Pakistan army, it was a joint operation again. Pakistan army was backing those coverts with slogan Muslim ka gar, Hindu ka zar और Sikh ka sar, which means to be get sheltered in the house of Muslim, looting the house of Hindu, and Sikh should not be separated at any cost. Only agenda was to kill Sikh peoples. As a result, more than 30,000 Sikhs were brutally killed, molested, women were kidnapped and taken to Pakistan. Properties of Gurdwara were burnt, and community has faced mass exodus from own land Muzaffarabad and Mirpur, now in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. No sooner did the state begin to develop both politically and economically than militancy found its way. But always Sikhs were put out of the gear. One day to next, militancy spread its roots deeply, but Sikhs were put out of the context. Everywhere, no, and also from political culture, as well as Sikh policies by center governments जो यहाँ पे रही हैं, जिन्होंने यहाँ पे काम किया, उनकी भी कहीं ना कहीं नलायकी रही है, जिसकी वजह से यहाँ पे वहाबीइज्म, यहाँ पे कश्मीर के अंदर जमात का जो सिस्टम था वो गवर्नमेंट स्ट्रक्चर्स के अंदर डेवलप हुआ, जिसकी वजह से Sikhs were considered as no Sikh is considered as an essential part of life. 2000 में 20 मार्च सन 2000 में जब बिल क्लिंटन इंडिया के दौरे पे आते हैं तो 35 सिखों का कश्मीर के अंदर कत्ल किया जाता है। सेम 3 फरवरी 2001 में 7 सिख जो है सिखों को महजूर नगर एरिया में मार दिया जाता है। सेम सर विक्टिम्स ऑफ मिलिटेंसी, there are list of 265 Sikhs target killings of Sikhs till date now in Jammu and Kashmir, जिसमें बलदेव सिंह, गुरमुख सिंह, जसबीर सिंह, सारे ये इनोसेंट लोग हैं जिनकी हमारे पास बहुत सारी लंबी चौड़ी लिस्टें पड़ी हुई हैं सर। यहाँ के जो पॉलिटिशियंस थे उनके अंदर भी कहीं ना कहीं जो पाकिस्तान का डायरेक्टली और इनडायरेक्टली जो है वो हाथ रहा है, क्योंकि वो हमेशा जब डिमांड करते थे अपने हक हकूक की, तो एक बात 370 को, आर्टिकल 370 और 35 अल्फा को अपना एजेंडा बता देते थे कि भाई 370 की वजह से हम यहाँ पे कोई डेवलपमेंट का काम नहीं कर सकते हैं, जिसकी वजह से सिखों को काफी ज्यादा सफर करना पड़ा। एग्जाम्पल ऑफ दैट, जैसे कि 35,000 सिखों का जो कत्लेआम है कश्मीर के अंदर वो 1947 के अक्टूबर महीने में हुआ है, और जो पूरी दुनिया है वो उसको जानती नहीं, क्योंकि 1947 को सिर्फ देश की जो देश का पार्टीशन हुआ है उस तक को लोगों ने महदूद रखा और उस तक ही जान सके। आज तक जम्मू एंड कश्मीर की जो सरकार है इन्होंने भी कोई व्हाइट पेपर तक जारी नहीं किया। सिखों के पाकिस्तान में गुरुद्वारा करतारपुर साहब तो कंस्ट्रक्ट करके सिखों को ये बता दिया कि गुरुद्वारा साहिब है करतारपुर साहब में, हम सिखों की सिंपैथी गेन करने के लिए, वर्ल्ड सिख डायस्पोरा की अट्रैक्शन अपनी तरफ करने के लिए। लेकिन गुरुद्वारा नलूची साहिब को कोई नहीं जानता, जो हिस्टोरिकल सिख गुरुद्वारा अभी के पाक ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर के अंदर है, जिसमें 2000 सिखों की लाशों को जला दिया गया था 1947 के अक्टूबर महीने में, जो पाकिस्तान की मुस्लिम लीग की कॉन्स्पिरेसी के साथ अटैक सिखों के ऊपर किया गया था। तो गुरुद्वारा नलूची साहिब, गुरुद्वारा संतपुर डन्ना जैसे जो गुरुद्वारे साहिबान है वो वहां पे पाक ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर में है। सेम अगर बात करें, जब भी सिख कम्युनिटी जम्मू एंड कश्मीर की गवर्नमेंट के पास बात करने जाती थी कि हमारे राइट्स जो है वो हमें दीजिए, माइनॉरिटी का जो मुद्दा है जम्मू कश्मीर के सिखों का, हमेशा उसके लिए डिमांड वक्तन फवक्तन उठती रही है। और जब भी हम गवर्नमेंट के पास बात करने के लिए जाते थे तो यहाँ की गवर्नमेंटें जो है सिर्फ और सिर्फ एक चीज को लेके अपना एजेंडा बना लेती थी कि इट्स देयर इज आर्टिकल 370 जिसकी वजह से हम यहाँ पे कुछ भी नहीं कर पाते। और आज तक जम्मू कश्मीर के सिखों को उन राइट से महदूद रखा गया। अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट सर, जो सिख माइग्रेंट होके वहां से आए, वहां से आकर के यहाँ पे बसे हैं, उन 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 सिखों को भी जम्मू एंड कश्मीर में यहाँ की सरकारों ने जो है सेकंड क्लास के सिटीजन बना के रखा है। अपर हाउस में पाक ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीरीज के लिए 26 सीटें जो है रिजर्व रखी गई, लेकिन यहाँ पे वो जो सिख कम्युनिटी है जो पाकिस्तान से उजड़ करके यहाँ पर आए और रेफ्यूजी लाइफ अभी तक बिता रहे हैं, उन लोगों को उनमें भी कोई हक हकूक जो है नहीं दिया गया। और सर ये सारी चीजें जो है, ये इन सारी चीजों के पीछे पाकिस्तान का जो है हाथ कहीं ना कहीं रहा है, चाहे किलिंग कश्मीर में सिख की हो या पाकिस्तान में हो। अभी पाकिस्तान पे जिस दिन गुरुद्वारा ननकाना साहब के ऊपर पथराव होता है, इमरान चस्ती स्टोन पेल्टिंग करवाता है, इमरान खान साहब दुनिया को आईवाश करने के लिए उनको कुछ मेरे सामने ये पड़े हुए हैं जो पाकिस्तान के कानून के मुताबिक उनके ऊपर लॉज इंपोज कर देते हैं। लेकिन सेम कुछ दिन के बाद रविंदर सिंह 25 साल के जो पाकिस्तान के एक जर्नलिस्ट पब्लिक न्यूज एंकर हरमीत सिंह के भाई हैं, उनका कत्ल कर दिया जाता है, उनको मार दिया जाता है। और अभी रिसेंट एग्जांपल है अफगानिस्तान के अंदर सिखों के कत्ल हुए। तो पाकिस्तान एक तरफ तो ये कहता है कि आओ दुनिया वर्ल्ड सिख डायस्पोरा को की सिंपैथी गेन करने के लिए कि आप यहाँ पे आए और यहाँ पे हम उनको शेल्टर करेंगे, लेकिन इंटरनेशनल सिख डायस्पोरा को ये सोचना चाहिए कि जो वहां पे स्पॉन्सर्ड खालिस्तानी टेररिज्म हरप्रीत पीएचडी का जो कत्ल हुआ वो उसको सेफ नहीं कर पाया, तो बाकी सिखों की सेफ्टी की बात कहां से वो लोग करते हैं। और ये सारा दुनिया को आईवाश करना और सिर्फ इंटरनेशनल सिख डायस्पोरा का पैसा कैश करना। अभी करतारपुर साहब के ऊपर उन्होंने जो फीस लगा रखी है अपना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर कंट्री का डेवलप करने के लिए, सिख लोगों के मनी के साथ उनका तालमेल है और बाकी सिख लोगों के साथ उनको कोई सिंपैथी नहीं है, ना ही वहां पे रह रहे किसी हिंदू के साथ उनकी कोई सिंपैथी है। उनको सिर्फ और एक मैकेनिज्म और एक टूल बना के हमेशा यूज करते आए हैं। कश्मीर के अंदर अभी तक 265 से ज्यादा सिखों को, मैं एग्जांपल्स कोट करके बताता हूं सर, 7 सिखों का कत्ल सन 2001 में उस वक्त कर दिया गया जब वो निहत्ते गरीब सिख बेचारे गुरुद्वारा से शाम की इवनिंग प्रेयर करके वापस आ रहे थे। उनका जो किलिंग है वो मिलिटेंट्स से करवाया गया। शहर पोशकरीडी गांव साउथ कश्मीर के अनंतनाग डिस्ट्रिक्ट में है, वहां पे 2 सिख लड़कियों की इवनिंग प्रेयर करते हुए गोलियां मार के उनका कत्ल कर दिया गया। 5 सिखों का कत्ल सिख ड्राइवर्स का जो सामान लोड करके जम्मू से कश्मीर आ रहे थे, अपनी कश्मीर के अंदर अपने नापाक इरादों को बुलंद करने के लिए उन सिखों का कत्ल कर दिया गया। और अभी भी सरपंच की जो किलिंग हुई है वो सारी अभी भी वो इश्यूज हैं। और कम्युनिटी के जो लीडर्स हैं जो यहाँ पे आवाज बुलंद करें और सिख कम्युनिटी को रिप्रेजेंट करें, उनको मार दिया जाता है। एक माइनॉरिटी जो कश्मीर के अंदर पंडित माइनॉरिटी, हमारे पंडित भाई दिन दिहाड़े इन लोगों ने यहाँ से भगा दिया। और इन लोगों का अभी भी कश्मीर के अंदर जो सिख कम्युनिटी रह रही है उनके ऊपर आंख है कि क्योंकि ये डायरेक्टली अगर सिख कम्युनिटी को यहाँ से निकालते हैं उस चीज से इनके इरादे जो है एक्सपोज हो जाएंगे। तो सिख कम्युनिटी की जो सफरिंग्स है आज की डेट में मैंने कुछ कोट की गई हैं जो डे बाय डे कश्मीर के अंदर हो रही हैं, जिसमें सबसे बड़ा इशू कश्मीर में रहते सिखों का स्लो माइग्रेशन है। जो भी सिख बच्चा या बच्ची कश्मीर से बाहर पढ़ने के लिए जा रहा है, उसको यहाँ वापस आने का नाम नहीं लेता, क्योंकि उसको अपनी जानी और माली सिक्योरिटी यहाँ पे लगती ही नहीं है। बिजनेस लॉस, सिखों का सबसे बड़ा जो बिजनेस है कश्मीर के अंदर ट्रांसपोर्ट का बिजनेस था, जो बिल्कुल हड़तालों की वजह से क्रिपल हो चुका है। डिस्प्लेसमेंट्स, जो सिख गांवों में रहते थे जहाँ पे मिलिटेंसी ज्यादा ज्यादा है, वो लोग शहरों में आए और शहरों से कश्मीर के बाहर चले गए। नौकरियों का मसला है, नौकरियों में आस्ता आस्ता जो है सिखों को यहाँ से जो उनका बनता हक था, अभी तक सिखों को उसे महदूद रखा गया। पिछले 15 साल की हमारे पास लिस्टें पड़ी हुई हैं, आप निकाल करके भी देख लें। जेके एसएसआरबी की जो लिस्टें हैं, उनमें सिखों को अगर कहीं 2000 मुस्लिम लग रहे हैं तो एक कहीं जाके कोई सिख जो इन्फ्लुएंसर्ड होता है वो नौकरी पा लेता है, और आमतौर पे एट पार लाइन जो है सिखों को कुछ नहीं मिलता। सेकंड सर, कुछ लोग, जिन लोगों की सिखों की किलिंग्स हो चुकी हैं, एसआरओ के जो उनके हक हकूक थे, जैसे मैंने अभी एग्जांपल कोर्ट की 2 सिख लड़कियों को जिनको मिलिटेंट्स ने मार दिया गया था इवनिंग प्रेयर करते, उनके भाई चमकौर सिंह को अभी भी एसआरओ के तहत जम्मू कश्मीर के कानून के मुताबिक नौकरी मिलनी थी। यहाँ पे नेशनल कॉन्फ्रेंस की सरकार भी 5 साल सरकार कर चुकी है कांग्रेस के साथ, पीडीपी ने भी सरकार की है, लेकिन उन दो चमकौर सिंह को अभी तक एसआरओ के जो हक हकूक है उनसे दूर रखा गया। अभी सिख लोगों की कोई डिमांड थी पहाड़ी लैंग्वेज को लेके, हमारी लैंग्वेज को यहाँ कंसीडर नहीं किया गया। सो सर, अगर माइनॉरिटीज के ये इम्पैक्ट जो है ये यहाँ देखने को मिले, क्योंकि डीप रूटेड जो है यहाँ के जर्नल, चाहे कोई भी डिपार्टमेंट हो, उस डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर इन सारे लोगों का, रेडिकल्स का, वहाबीज का, जमातीज का एक अच्छा खासा सेटअप है, जो प्री प्लान्ड ढंग से काम कर रहे हैं। और वो लोग जो है यहाँ पे ये सिखों को साइकोलॉजिकल प्रेशर में डालना चाहते हैं, ताकि जो सिख कश्मीर के अंदर किसी वक्त 2.5 लाख के करीब रहते थे और आज रिड्यूस होके उनके आंकड़े जो है 30-35 हजार के करीब आ चुके हैं। तो ये आप अंदाजा लगा सकते हैं, अगर कश्मीर में रह रहे सिखों के साथ ये हो रहा है जो कि इंडिया का पार्ट है, तो पाकिस्तान ऑक्यूपाइड कश्मीर और रेस्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान में जो माइनॉरिटीज रह रही होंगी उनके साथ क्या होता होगा। तो सर, इन सारे लोगों की ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ फेलियर ऑफ सिख एंड हिंदू लीडरशिप है, जिनका इस तरफ कोई ध्यान नहीं गया और सिर्फ उन्होंने मैनेज एंड एंगेज की गेम खेली है टाइम टू टाइम, और मीडिया के ऊपर आके बड़ी बड़ी बातें की ग्राउंड लेवल के ऊपर, जिन्होंने आज तक कुछ नहीं कर सका। सो इस तरह की अगर एग्जाम्पलें कोट करने पे आए, पाकिस्तान के इलाकों के अंदर बहुत सी किलिंग्स हैं जो सिखों की, मैंने सिर्फ यहाँ पे आपको 265 टारगेट किलिंग्स ऑफ सिक्स, 35 सिक्स जो चिट्ठी सिंहपुरा में मारे गए, 5 ये कुछ वो आंकड़े बताए जो इस कश्मीर के हैं। वहां के आंकड़ों, वहां के कई आंकड़े तो ऐसे हैं जिनकी सर हम एग्जाम्पलें अगर देने पे आए हैं, ये सारी डिबेट खत्म हो जाएगी और वो एट्रोसिटीज खत्म नहीं होनी है। तो उन मैं लास्ट में सर यही एक शेर, उन्हीं से आंख चुरा के चली गई बाहर, जिनके चलते फूलों में रंग आया। सिख कम्युनिटी का सर इस देश के लिए, इस देश की बहबूदगी के लिए सर जहां पे भी जरूरत पड़ी सर हमने कुर्बानियां की हैं। सर आप हमारी कुर्बानियों का रेट निकाल कर देखें सर, सबसे ज्यादा आपको मिलेगा। उसके बाद सर हमारी कम्युनिटी जो है सर एक सिंपैथी सर जो हमको अपने मुल्क से चाहिए थी सर, वो भी अभी जम्मू कश्मीर में रह रहे सिखों को नहीं मिल पा रही है सर। डायरेक्टली ओनली एंड ओनली कश्मीर में आजकल की डेट में सर सिर्फ एक सिख कम्युनिटी है जो हर तरफ से हरास हो रही है। सर अगर इसकी तरफ कोई गौर खसूस नहीं हुआ सर, दिन वो भी आएगा जिस जो ये 30-35 हजार सिख यहाँ पे बचे हैं, साइकोलॉजिकली परेशान कर दिए जाएंगे और यहाँ से निकलने के लिए मजबूर होंगे। इतना मुझे कहना सर।
अब आपने आपने बहुत अच्छी बात कही। मैं एक बात इस पूरे गेम के अंदर मैं एक बात देख रहा हूँ कि इतनी तकलीफ सिखों को कश्मीर में पेश आ रही है, पाकिस्तान में सिखों के साथ इतनी ज्यादतियां हो रही हैं, लेकिन जो एक नैरेटिव, जो एक संदेश जो वैश्विक स्तर पर जा रहा है, वो ये जा रहा है कि साहब हिंदुस्तान जुल्म करता है क्या। ये पूरी की पूरी खालिस्तान लीडरशिप जिस तरह की मैसेजिंग कर रही है, और वो ना सिर्फ एंटी इंडिया है, चलिए वो तो ठीक है, लेकिन एंटी सिख है, उसके ऊपर कोई आवाज नहीं उठाता। इनफैक्ट करंट गवर्नमेंट का भी मैं एक बात कहूंगा कि आपने जैसे बताया था कश्मीर यूनिवर्सिटी के अंदर सिखों का आप नंबर निकाल लीजिए, कितने सिख प्रोफेसर थे, आज भी वहां पर जमाती इस्लामी की और इन सब के इतने सिस्टम इंटैक्ट है। ये गवर्नमेंट जो अपने आप को नेशनल सिक्योरिटी का सबसे बड़ा एक्सपर्ट क्लेम करती है, कश्मीर के अंदर सेपरेटिस्ट इकोसिस्टम के अंदर ग्राउंड लेवल पर क्या डेटा है आपको
सर जहां तक खालिस्तानी सिखों की बात है वहां मैं ये कहना चाहता हूं कि उन्हीं के भाई हरप्रीत सिंह पीएचडी का कत्ल सर हमें यहाँ पे बैठे ये खबरें मिली। हरप्रीत पीएचडी जो कि खालिस्तान लिबरेशन फोर्स का कमांडर था और पाकिस्तान की धरती के ऊपर उसका कत्ल हो जाता है। सर ये लोग पाकिस्तान में उसको सेफ्टी नहीं दे पाए तो इनको कहां से देंगे। अगेन ये आईएसआई के प्रोपेगेंडा का सर आईएसआई की पॉलिसीज का शिकार हो रहे हैं। मेरे सिख भाई जितनी जल्दी हो सके अगर उनको एग्जाम्पल ही देखनी है तो कश्मीर की सिख हिस्ट्री के ऊपर डालकर देखें। 35,000 सिखों का 1947 अक्टूबर महीने में कत्ल किया गया है। वो लोग कश्मीर के सिखों की एग्जाम्पल देखें। कश्मीर में सिखों के साथ क्या हो रहा है, कश्मीर के सिखों को के ऊपर अपनी एक निगाह डालें। कश्मीर के सिखों के ऊपर हो रही एट्रोसिटीज की एग्जाम्पल पूरी दुनिया में बैठे सिखों के साथ है। और दोबारा से बड़ी मुश्किल से सर पंजाब के अंदर शांति आई है और उस शांति को बहाल रखिए, उस शांति के बारे में सोचें। पंजाब में जो नार्को टेररिज्म है उसके पीछे पाकिस्तान है। सर कहां से इतने ड्रग्स के सर केसेस है पूरे पंजाब की। सर आज आप रिपोर्ट्स निकाल कर देखिए सर पंजाब की कोखें बांझ हो चुकी है और पंजाब की मर्दानगी निपुंसक हो चुकी है जो किसी वक्त देश को बेहतरीन फौजी, बेहतरीन एथलीट्स, बेहतरीन स्पोर्ट्समैन देती थी। सर उनकी हालत आज देख चुकी है। वो सारा नार्को टेररिज्म जो कि पाकिस्तान की जमीन से आ रहा है। इन खालिस्तानी भाइयों को जो आईएसआई के प्रोपेगेंडा का शिकार है, इनको इन सारी चीजों को के ऊपर नजर रखनी चाहिए। और अगर बहुती नजर ये नहीं रख पा रहे, कश्मीर के अंदर देखें कैसे इस्लामिक यूनिवर्सिटी के अंदर सिख लड़की की स्टैबिंग की गई, कैसे बम ब्लास्टों में सिखों को मारा गया। अगर इनको एग्जाम्पल्स ही चाहिए मेरे साथ रब्ता करें, मैं उनको लिस्टों की लिस्टें प्रोवाइड करूंगा।
थैंक यू अमन। ये बहुत ही एक तकलीफदेह बात है कि 35,000 सिख्स का कत्ल हो जाता है और इसके बारे में ना किसी की कोई डॉक्यूमेंटेशन है, ना कोई रिसर्च पेपर है, ना कोई डॉक्यूमेंट्री है। कोई दुनिया में इसके बारे में जानता नहीं। वेस्टर्न कम्युनिटीज में ज्यूइश होलोकॉस्ट होता है, उसके ऊपर इतनी फिल्म्स बनी है, इतने सीरीज, डॉक्यू ड्रामास, और आज भी दुनिया के अंदर एक बहुत बड़ा मुद्दा है। हम लोग अपनी बातों को, अपने जुल्मों को बाहर नहीं निकालते।
सर एक एग्जांपल मैं और यहाँ पे देना चाहता हूँ। हर साल जिस दिन कश्मीर के अंदर फौज आई है उस दिन को सर ये ब्लैक डे मनाते हैं। सर कभी आज तक इन्होंने कश्मीर में 35,000 इनोसेंट सिखों के ब्रूटल किलिंग्स, मॉलेस्टेशंस, रेप्स के बारे में सर कभी कोई ह्यूमन राइट्स वैल्यूज नहीं हुए। सर कभी ह्यूमन राइट्स की बात तक नहीं की। जो पाकिस्तान एट्रोसिटीज की बात कर रहा है वो 35,000 सिखों के कत्ल का जवाब दे। जो कत्ल पाकिस्तान के मुस्लिम लीग के लीडर शौकत हयात खान, उनकी आर्मी ब्रिगेड के अकबर खान और उन लीडरों ने करवाया है कश्मीर के अंदर, और आज तक वो उनका घिनौना खेल जो है, छिछोरा खेल, वो कश्मीर के अंदर जारी है। सिखों की किलिंग्स जारी है। माइनॉरिटीज, कश्मीर में रह रही हिंदू माइनॉरिटी पंडित भाइयों को यहाँ से भगा दिया गया है। आप जो सिख है उनको टारगेट किया जा रहा है। डायरेक्टली ये लोग सिखों को टारगेट नहीं कर रहे, लेकिन साइकोलॉजिकली सिख लोगों के ऊपर प्रेशर इतना ज्यादा है सर। सिख लोग यहाँ पे अपनी जानी और माली दोनों चीजें सर जो है उनको, क्योंकि सर अपने हक हकूक मांगने के लिए जब एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन के पास जाते हैं और वहां एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में सर हमारी कोई सुनवाई नहीं होती। सर दिल्ली में बैठे बड़े बड़े कमरे वाले बाबुओं से भी सर मेरी दो हाथ जोड़ के विनती है, कश्मीर में बैठी एक अनहेयर्ड सर माइनॉरिटी को सुने और यहाँ पे हमारा दर्द समझे।
थैंक यू श्वेता जी, डॉक्टर रत्नू, धर्मेंद्र जी एंड सावियो. We heard all the different opinions on what's happening exactly. And to sum it up, it gets boiled down to the fact that from our side, we could never bring these things out. We really failed, and we failed badly. Even the right-wing groups of India, I would say all the political parties of India, the so-called Hindu nationalist groups of India, they should be ashamed of themselves. They are really good at chanting nationalistic slogans. That's perfectly fine. Bharat Mata ki Jai and all that is perfectly fine. But when it comes to bringing the real issues out, that requires efforts. That requires making efforts in writing research papers, contributing to journals, articles, docudramas. There we have badly failed. I'm asking all the panelists, how do we do that? How do we blame Pakistan? How do we get them to task for killing 35,000 Sikhs in Kashmir, for killing Christians in Pakistan, and for spreading their radicalizing or their, this extremist agenda to different parts of India? What do we do to bring these stories out? What should our civil society, our academicians, our journalistic society and our political society should do.
You see, we are talking so much about what is happening about the minorities in Pakistan. What we are not talking about is, you see, it is going to happen in India where the majority community is going to become a minority in certain parts of India. And I'm afraid to say nobody is talking about it. And I'm again going to go back to Assam and Bengal because I know what is going on over there. In Bengal, in particular, along the border districts and about 3 to 4 districts, there has been a complete demographic change. And there are areas in Bengal, I have gone there and I have seen what is happening over there. People are already not being allowed to, worship their goddesses over there. Once in a while, some news comes out. Land grab is taking place. Their goddesses Durga Murti and all, they have been decapitated. The language along the border is changing. The demography has changed. So this is a huge threat, and there's a lot of ISI elements are there. So it is an unbelievable situation, but nobody is talking about it. What is happening to Bengal? Bengal is sitting on a powder keg. If we do not start talking about it, Bengal will go the Kashmir way sooner than later.
Thank you, Joy. One more thing. Why is the government, the government claims to be a very conscious government, very firm on security issues, Why don't we see, there is something missing. It's been more than 6 years, but absolutely there is something missing everywhere in Kerala, Kashmir, and Bengal. Why aren't we able to take action against PFI? What are we waiting for? You have to say something?
May I?
Please, Joyitaji, if you want to say something, after that I'll get back to Dr. Rathu.
Well, I know, you see, this is the problem with federal structure. You see, when the center is not strong, when you're talking about federalism, and you see, when you have these states, whichever state you have talked about are all opposition ruled states currently. Not about Kashmir. Kashmir, of course, is a different thing altogether right now, but then Kashmir is a different case altogether. Say Kerala and Bengal, these are opposition ruled states, and it is very difficult, and these have very strong regional parties. The CPM is actually a regional party over there. It's very difficult for the center until and unless it gets the political part of it does not get it activated on the ground. It is very difficult in our federal structure for the central government to kind of control the situation in these states. So this is why, the center needs to be stronger. But then again, we are going to talk about, what happens to the federal nature of our state, because these states have made it into, federal nature is basically quasi-autonomous status for our states. When it becomes like that, you cannot go around imposing president's rule. So that is the primary problem.
Thank you. Dr. Ratnu? Dr. Ratnu, can you hear me?
So the primary reason.
Savio, this is true for you also, you and Dr. Ratnu both. Well, these organizations like be it PFI or Jamaat-e-Islami, there is this whole ecosystem. I prefer to call it Islamist ecosystem. When I use the word jihadi terrorist groups, we specifically refer to groups like Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed. When I refer to Islamist groups, we refer to groups like PFI and Jamaat-e-Islami who proclaim to be charities or indulging in religious, cultural, political work, but they are pursuing an entirely different agenda. When I use the word religious groups, then we are very strictly referring to some religious clerics. Now the question is that the way these groups, especially the most dangerous are the Islamist groups, when they function, and some of them Tablighi Jamaat, Jamaat-e-Islami, PFI. First of all, they believe in a totalitarian ideology. They believe in an extremist ideology. So as a state, don't you think that we should venture into a different domain to deal with such groups who have a completely different methodology, completely different ideology? Savio, Dr. Ratnu.
And I'll tell you why I don't. I think The only aspect of which I agree with you is that uh, the government was not prepared in their communication parameters as far as the CA protest was concerned. Let me complete what I'm saying. Okay. Uh, their response was about a week. And I say that because I'm quite an analyst myself and I work on communication, issues with certain aspects of the government. And when I was asked for my view, I told them very categorically, like I did on Kashmir as well, that the communication was delayed by about 7 days. Okay. Uh, in the time span of 7 to 10 days, to be more precise, the lobby that is against India, coming from international as well as the lobby in and within India, was able to paint a narrative that minorities are in danger and the Muslims are going to be thrown out of India. Now I'll tell you why that worked. Okay, because the government itself and its spokespersons were not clear. Okay, the most interesting aspect, and I'll tell you what they were not clear because I interacted with some of them. Nobody was sure of the date. Okay, the date was up to December 31st, 2014, which primarily meant that the people, the Hindus, the Sikh, and the Christians that were already in India were the ones who were going to get citizenship. Now you pick up any of the communications of the BJP spokespersons or people who spoke on BJP behalf on those 7 to 10 days I'm talking about. I'm not talking beyond that. I'm talking in those 7 to 10 days. They never communicated this aspect. Never in any of the communication. It was left for them to actually come out much later. By that time, they had already let out the information that the Muslims were in danger. Now you must understand that while it might be right to say that you can buy out op-eds in various other media in the Western world, the Western world's interest is not the money that you're going to throw to them. Please understand, Islam and Christianity always works together as far as a nation is concerned. Okay, it is a joint understanding that goes way back to Jerusalem. So Islam will not, you see, US will not say anything to Saudi Arabia, will not say anything to Pakistan, will not say anything to the Middle Eastern countries, right? But they will have an issue as far as India is concerned because India is a Hindu nation. So to Islamists and Christian people in their leadership, it is the Hindus that are the enemies and not Islam. And that is where the problem is. So if you were to write to Washington Post, if you were to write to New York Times, and you would pay them a hell of a lot of money, they would still not write in the favor of the Hindus. It is not India, it is the Hindus. You have to understand this.
I quite agree with you that these two Abrahamics are in cahoots with each other, and when it comes to annihilating Hindus, but then what are our options? Except that
Let me tell you, one of the first options. Let me say this clearly. One of the first options. Let's take PFI. No, now PFI. 3 states have written to the center to have investigation done on this organization and ban this organization. Why has the center not moved ahead on that petition of 3 states, not one state? 3 states have asked for banning of PFI, but nobody in the center has ever moved on that. 2, you have Ahl Hadith in Kashmir. They went ahead and banned Jamaat Islamiyah, but they have not worked on Ahl Hadith in Kashmir. Now, Ahl Hadith is a very religious and a very, very totalitarian, very radicalized group. And some of the most educated people you will find in Ahl Hadith, not in Jamaat Islamiyah. The most educated people. But has the government gone ahead and worked towards banning Ahl Hadith? Not yet.
Savio, I think Joyitaji wants to say something. Just a moment. Joyitaji, you want to say something? Hello?
When we're talking about the Western media and their bias against India, and to see, it is very interestingly it's working. You see, the Hindus are the oppressors, the Burmese Buddhists are oppressors and the Muslims are
Exactly.
the so you see there is a strong fear even among the journalists in the Western world about being branded Islamophobe. So it is much easier to sell them stories about atrocities being committed against Muslims than stories about atrocities being committed on Hindus. So
Yes.
it will be much easier to sell a story, fiction, actual fiction, which some of we can call them fifth columnists in India who do that, who write for New York Times and Washington Post. It is easier to talk about Narendra Modi's quote unquote Hindu nationalist government oppressing Muslims, trying to disenfranchise Muslims, than write about Imran Khan, who is actually an Islamist and heads up Muslim country, and it is a radical extremist country that they are persecuting minorities. That will never find a reflection in the West, but it will find it over here. It is because number one, confirmation bias, and also the fear of being branded is both are working. And Muslim money is very much at work here. Gulf money is very much responsible for this.
We have a government, which for years have been claiming that when they get into the power, they'll be forthright, they'll be confident, and they'll be strong in dealing with these. I have been associated with the government in some capacity, but I personally feel that when you don't want to act against a petition filed in the case of a child abuse, that means at some level you are a coward, you don't have principles, and you are scared, you are diffident. Secondly, I must say, what we are doing on our social media, what we are doing on our prime time news debates, be it Republic, be it Aaj Tak, whatever, what we are doing, that is doing a complete disservice. We are not able to come out with a robust counter narrative, and that
Correct.
requires writing good research papers, evidence based objective study, nuanced analysis, quantitative and qualitative analysis. If we come out with that, we have good journals, and we have people in the government, people in the current political dispensation financing that kind of stuff, definitely will be able to convince the Westerners, because the data, the power of the data speaks. But unfortunately, even with the current ruling dispensation and the people who are calling the shots, I don't see that kind of initiative. There is a complete lack of awareness, and there is a complete lack of action on these fronts. Our academicians consider their qualities, the kind of research which they do, the kind of op-eds which we are writing. We are not making a robust counter narrative. Abusing each other on prime time news channels and almost daily evening TV debates, that is not going to help. I mean, this is just an observation. My final question to Amanjeet Singh and Dharmendra ji. So Aman and Dharmendra, we spoke a lot about the atrocities being faced by Sikhs. But currently, presently, there's this huge Khalistan lobby across the globe. They have come out with this referendum 2020, and they are putting in a lot of effort. How can Indian Sikh community leave aside the government? I don't expect anything from them. This is a government. There are layers of, multiple layers of bureaucracy, multiple layers of politicians who hardly read anything. But as a community, people like you, what you can do, like in terms of countering that narrative which is coming from the Khalistani lobby.
Abhinavji, you are very right that the majority of the Sikh world over, they are silent on these issues. And it links to the whatever we are discussing for the past more than 1.5 hours. Uh, the lobby is very, very strong. As you said, as Mr. Ratnu was very right, and Mr. Savio also, that it's an economy. It's a huge, huge lobby, lot of money is involved, and this is backed by ISI, Pakistan military, and they have found their stronghold in India and even in the West. And the same thing is happening as far as the Khalistan movement is concerned. Uh, the Sikh fought against the Khalistan, in Punjab, and we fought it back. And but there are certain elements in US, in Canada, in England. They are funded. There's a dollar economy, as ma'am was talking about the Gulf economy. So there's a dollar economy also. So they are being backed by those elements who migrated from Punjab during the militancy time, and got settled there. Now they are playing into the hands of Pakistan ISI, Pakistan military, and today we know that Mr. Imran Khan, there is hardly a government, civilian government in Pakistan. It's the military that is ruling. So it's a huge lobby. This lobby has made inroads into Bollywood, into media, into universities. You are saying that research, what kind of research is going on. So that lobby is all prevalent. So that lobby is helping Khalistan element also everywhere. But that's very minuscule population of the community. The majority of population definitely democratic. They feel that India is a one country, united country, secular country. So we have to live with it. So in the end, I would say that there is a strong voice. We can't say that there is no voice against Khalistan. It is there, but the minuscule population, maybe 1 or 2%, that is more vocal. That's why we see that's more vocal and that's playing into the hands of lobby. So that's why we see them more on TV and in the media rather than that majority which is silently opposing Khalistan.
Thank you. Aman, what are you going to do to bring this, this Holocaust of 35,000 Sikhs in Kashmir out in the world?
Sir, several times I have decided to celebrate this day, जिस दिन ये कत्लेआम सर यहाँ पे हुआ है जम्मू एंड कश्मीर के अंदर, ये 35,000 सिखों का ये होलोकास्ट है। इसके लिए सर लास्ट ईयर भी हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन सिख यूथ ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर ने वर्ल्ड वाइड सर इस डे को सेलिब्रेट करना शुरू किया है सर। एक्चुअली क्योंकि सर ये क्लैश कर जाता है बहुत पूरी दुनिया के अंदर लोग जो है 1947 को देश की पार्टीशन के साथ जोड़ के देते हैं, लेकिन हम लोगों को सर समझा रहे हैं, उनको बताना शुरू किया है कि पार्टीशन 1947 की जो पार्टीशन है देश की, दैट इज समथिंग डिफरेंट। And in the month of October, this was pre-planned by Muslim League कि उस टाइम कदावर लीडर जो थे शौकत अयाज खान एंड ऑल दैट स्टफ जो इन्वॉल्व था, उन लोगों के बारे लिखना शुरू किया सर। जर्नल्स सर राइट अप्स लिख के अपनी सिख कम्युनिटी को सर इस बारे में भी अवेयर कर रहे हैं सर। लेट अस सी द रिस्पांस लास्ट एंड और जहां जहां पे भी कश्मीर की सिख कम्युनिटी जहां जहां रह रही है सर, वहां पे इस डे को सेलिब्रेट शुरू किया और इस बार भी करेंगे।
One of the things that we lack as a nation, and I think this is something that needs to come about gradually as we progress towards becoming a very strong global and economic power in the years to come. What we lack is conviction in our constitutional values, number one. What we lack is conviction in our roots as a nation. And three, what we lack is conviction that we are better than any other country in the world. So today, as rightfully said by this gentleman who spoke earlier, if we don't take a firm stand, I'm not saying we should take an aggressive stand. We have to take an assertive stand that if we have to protect the rights of our culture, our roots, the Hinduism in us, because that's really what our roots is, then we have to take a stand irrespective of what any person says about us. Because the real Sanatan Dharma in us will not allow us to attack the Muslims or the Sikhs or the Christians. No right-thinking Hindu does that. So this narrative can only be broken if we are assertive enough and care nothing about what international media or what international politicians think about us. We have to save our country. That's the most important thing. The aim is to divide India. That is the only aim. That is the only card they will ever play and ever use. So be assertive. India is one and India will always be one.
With this, I would like to end. Thank you very much. It has been a wonderful discussion. Vipindraji, thank you very much for your wonderful support.